So I watched Paterno, new HBO documentary. I think it's really well done. Quickly, if you don't know the story at all, Joe Paterno, football coach at Penn State, the winningest, most wins of any college football coach. So not a very the college football coach was at Penn State, I think 61 years before he got fired by a phone call, very famously. So what we know about the case is that somebody told Paterno that they saw Jerry Sandusky, who was assistant coaching defensive coordinator for 30 odd years, working with Paterno. So it wasn't a short relationship. Someone told Paterno that they saw Jerry Sandusky with one of these young boys molesting them. And Joe Paterno, he told his bosses what he heard, but then his bosses never followed up and never did anything about it. So Jerry Sandusky gets arrested. I think about 50 counts of child molestation. So just an incredible body of crime, just monstrous. And Joe Paterno was fired, as I said, by phone call. And Joe Paterno is beloved at Penn State and outside Penn State. So massive riots, protests when he got fired, and they've gone back and forth. I think they stripped his wins, some of his wins, and made him not the winningest coach anymore. But then they reinstated his wins. So very hot button topic. I think this documentary handles it really well, and let me talk about why. So Al Pacino plays Paterno. At first I wasn't sure about that choice. I thought it was going to be too much Pacino, and you were going to keep seeing Pacino no matter what, and weren't able to immerse yourself in the story. But I disagree. I thought very restrained performance from Al Pacino, and quite a good one. Now, there's one interpretation of the story that everybody knew exactly what a monster Jerry Sandusky was, but the football program was so important to people that they covered it up and tried to cover it up for as long as possible. I think the interpretation that this documentary takes is that people weren't able to see what was right before their eyes, and part of that shows that what we see when we look at a situation, it depends so much on the person that's there and the kind of associations we have with them. So if someone is at the YMCA and they see a homeless person who they don't know showering with a young boy, they might immediately think danger and predator and all those things. But if someone sees someone they know, someone who goes to all the same parties, someone who's a leader in the community like Sandusky was, someone who's a charity guy, someone who's a football guy at one of the good old boys that's part of the football program, if they see Sandusky doing the same thing, they might think it's weird and it's strange and it's inappropriate and there's boundaries being crossed and it's kind of a weird mentor-mentee relationship. They're going to see all those things and they're not going to see a monster. They're not going to see molestation. They're not going to see rape. So it just shows that I think someone can see something, but because of all these other biases and assumptions we make, sometimes you can't see things until they're too late. And it's really interesting how the documentary seems to try to make the argument that it was Paterno's obsession with football, him being distracted from anything else that was going on around him, that led to him not seeing the signs, not being more proactive when he saw these warning signs. And it's interesting because Joe Paterno, part of his legacy at Penn State was saying that athletics and academics aren't mutually exclusive. You can be a scholar and get great grades and still be just as good a football player. So it's interesting that for someone who part of his legacy for what he inspired others to do was be well-rounded and not just be just obsessed with one thing. Maybe in his own life, tragically, it was his obsession with just one thing, not being able to see the big picture, not being able to live a well-rounded life that led to what happened. And the image I think you get of Paterno at the end of his life, it wasn't someone who was lying and living a lie his whole life and finally got caught. It seemed to be someone who was looking at things and realizing that maybe he had the wrong priorities and maybe all his life he focused on the wrong things, didn't see the thing that matters. And it's interesting. It raises that question of what is someone's legacy? Is it, his 60 odd years of excellence and being a role model, or is it that one moment that really mattered, or those few moments in his life where he had the chance to maybe really save some young boys from some really traumatic, horrible things that happened to them, and he didn't deliver at that moment. He missed it, or he made the wrong choice. And is that the legacy, or is it everything else? And then they focus on Sandusky's charity, the Second Mile, infamous, now defunct, And you wonder why did Sandusky start this charity? Was it all image, and was it premeditated? Was he thinking all along, if I start this charity and build this halo around me, no one will ever accuse me, because they'll just think, well, how is anyone going to believe me when you have a guy who's everyone thinks is such a humanitarian, such a great guy? So how much of it, or is Sandusky a monster and also wanted to help people, and can you compartmentalize those two things? And some of the most chilling scenes for me, there's one where Paterno's brother, not all the students, some of the students come and they're chanting Paterno's name outside his house, and he comes outside and he says thank you, and they keep chanting, and they start chanting his name, the brother's name, and he says, look, we appreciate the support, but it's a horrible situation. There was serious trauma and abuse that was going on. I don't think it's a time to be chanting. And they don't listen. They just keep chanting, keep drowning him out, and he just goes inside. And it makes you think. And then we get the scene, very famous riots after Paterno was fired by phone call, and just the students just rioting. And this is one of the best, definitely best scene in the documentary. I think one of the best scenes in any media, movies, TV that I've seen. It would definitely be up there. Just chilling with the police and their riot gear and the students, and there's the woman who's playing the famous reporter that brought Paterno down. She's just watching what's going on around her, and they intersperse it with the radio, the people, the announcers and the pundits all giving their takes on it, and it's just a really powerful scene. And it makes you think. I think it was in Spider-Man, they said people love bringing people up and then taking them down. That's true, but it's also true that when you bring someone up and then you try to take them down, there's always going to be that core of loyalists and diehard fans that are going to viciously resist any attempt to take someone down, and you really saw it dramatized here. And I think the documentary, it did a great job just showing these things, and when you know the context, these things that would be very innocuous otherwise take on this darker meaning. So a lot of the plaques of Joe Paterno that said coach and educator of men and molder of men, they kept flashing to these, and just takes on that darker tone. And you see Paterno looking over, I think the hiring form for Sandusky, and it says access to training facilities and showers, and that's where a lot of the abuse takes place. And he's reading that, and something that if you didn't know, it would just seem completely innocuous, but suddenly when you know and you're informed, it just takes on this really dark tone. And you see Paterno looking this over, and you kind of see his face. It seems like he's struggling with, did he really know? Did he know at some level when he saw all these things, and he would make jokes about Sandusky? There's this very, very sickening scene where Paterno's giving a speech and he's joking about Sandusky and how he always has these young boys around him, and he thinks it's weird and he doesn't understand it. Like when he saw those things in the contract and he made these jokes, consciously maybe he didn't know, but at some level deep down did he know and just didn't want to know. And I will say the documentary ends with, I think, a pretty bold claim that I haven't heard anyone else make. It says that someone told Paterno way back in the 1970s that they were being abused, and Paterno abused by Sandusky, and Paterno said to them, "You shouldn't talk that way about Jerry. He's a good man." Now, I haven't heard anyone else make that claim at all, but if that claim is true, it's absolutely devastating. So I'm surprised that isn't getting more. I've read a few articles on this, and no one really seems to be talking about how the documentary ended. It'll be interesting if going forward there's any kind of more brought up about that. And one thing I did read in an article, apparently there's a mural in Pennsylvania, and is Paterno, and there's a halo above his head, and the artist actually took the halo off and then decided to put the halo back. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how many people are struggling with this issue, and just what do we think of Paterno. And I think different people are gonna come down on different sides of just what is his legacy.